Chapter 6. For the second time in my life, I found myself racing through the cyclopean halls of the maddening corpse city of Relie. Another worldly deity leading the way to its inner sanctum, faced with a creature opposed us at the center. No longer could I be surprised at the dizzying effects of the black masonry, the odd angles and queer shapes that acted differently within the architecture than my mind would expect them to, for by now I had learned that the mere sight of these things were enough to toy with my mind no matter how often I had seen them. The Yellow King followed the scent of my so-called companion in the air, until we finally came upon the silver-haired outer god and the red-haired great old one in a massive corridor, face to face in some sort of standoff. Not willing to get in between them, or even to witness whatever spectacle a battle between the two things might look like, I quickly shed some words of safety for the two as the boy directed my attention towards the scent of my mother. When we reached a monolithic set of doors that led to a room no doubt equally as large, I stopped to behold them and inquired if this was our destination. The king in yellow confirmed that a scent much like mine was coming from this room, and we took to pushing the gigantic doors open. What greeted us were two figures, my mother and her captor, standing at what seemed to be a set of controls for a large apparatus. Sets of monitors and switches lined the panel under the inspection of my mother, attached to large towers holding vats of a green, liquid substance. What purpose could such a machine possibly have? What connection did it have to my mother? To be frank, I cannot recall the explanation of the apparatus with absolute certainty. The explanation the tentacle-haired thing gave to its purpose, the admiration my own mother had for it, and the reason my mother was so desirable in its construction, were all too much for me to bear at the time. My mother was brought on for her opinion on the operation of this machine, for she had demonstrated such an affinity for Earth-based entertainment systems, that the galaxy took notice and sought her opinion on a machine of cosmic scale. My mother accepted the invitation only out of sheer curiosity, and did not sense any danger in coming to this place. Their conversation of intergalactic corporations and products between themselves, and later the two others who would join us, were not for the ears of a normal human. Instead, I was again struck dumb by yet another example of the scale of these beings, for yet again I had feared for my life, encountered things far beyond normal imagination, and faced great danger, for reasons that did not measure past entertainment for these accursed deities. With a simple observation and a casual explanation, however, my mother deemed the apparatus to be a failure of sorts. How she so easily came to this conclusion I still do not understand. Yet, she could so easily talk down to a being that hailed from Zoth along with the other star spawn of the true dreamer of the sunken city, dismissing her triumphant cries of the machine's power. Almost immediately, a ringing sound came from the pocket of the star spawn, and it spoke with a superior from the corporation it represented. And with a few words met with disbelief, it seemed as if the project to finalize the construction of this maddening device was suddenly discontinued. The kidnapper nearly went limp at the sudden turn of events, its red eyes suddenly emptying of the powerful spark that bore itself into my head. With a maddening laugh it sprinted to the controls, wailing of the machine's power and capabilities of the machine. It would not have the end of its work come so easily, and announced that the operation of the device would change the minds of whatever creature had decided the machine to be inadequate. With a push of a button, the apparatus lurched into operation, filling the massive room with the deep, heavy sound of the beginning of its operation, the green vats suddenly casting a crimson hue over us all. Suddenly, doors on either side of the room opened to reveal hordes of deep ones, those fish-toed humanoids that revealed the namesake of the captor's company, which began filling the room in great number. The sound of their croaking speech, the sight of their irregular hopping, and the awful fishy stench nearly causing me to faint. The blasphemous creatures approached us with an air of hostility. Though they were usually under orders from the tentacle creature, it denied any responsibility of ordering them to enter the room. Despite that, the first few deep ones rushed forward, baying and moaning in a fit of rage, and attacked. They were easily cast aside by my protector, who still held the responsibility of keeping me safe. Even so, it looked apprehensive at the sheer number of the things, which all looked like they were ready to pounce at any given time. The young boy behind me finally spoke up, surmising that the creature were acting so hostile due to some sort of mind control effect the operational machine had on them. As the fish-like things began their assault, they were set down one by small, fork-like projectiles. Though I still refused to believe it, I now had no choice but to acknowledge the story I had heard the day before, for before my very eyes I witnessed my own mother in battle, fighting off a horde of creatures that should not be witnessed by humans with relative ease and grace that could only be born of knowledge and experience. After the things were dealt with, the original arriver, now clad in that mockingly familiar armor that I had seen in our last visit to this cursed place, demanded that the machine be destroyed. The green-haired subordinate of some other creature I do not wish to identify made an attempt to protect it, but whether by responsibility, self-interest, or more likely, some passing whim, the ancient pharaoh demanded its destruction. A resolute declaration from the fiery elemental stopped it, however, as the burning one, out of some affinity for the machine, wanted to do the deed itself. After a brief argument from the other creature, I intervened. I plead for the case of the red creature in hopes that a quick resolution to this petty argument would free me from this monolithic room, this cyclopean city, the menacing black masonry and non-Euclidean architecture that had nearly driven me to wit's end. And finally, with a massive inferno that seemed to come from the being itself, the apparatus was destroyed. And so we made our way back to land, stopping to rest on the beach where we had departed just the night before. It seems that the King in Yellow had come to this town with similar interest as the Starspawn did, for it too was part of a company that had interest in constructing a machine and sought the opinion of my mother. It decided to return, however, with the intention of declaring my mother off limits for future endeavors. I was grateful for this conclusion, but still could feel nothing but relief as the young boy bid farewell, a cheery goodbye as it ran off to go back to wherever it came from. I would enjoy the feeling of the massive weight of its presence being lifted off the air around me, even though a knowing voice in the back of my head whispered of the futility and being relieved at something that I knew would only be temporary. That fear came to realization the next day, as in an all too familiar scene, a deity off from this world stood in front of my class, wrote my family name next to its own for all to see, and announced its transfer into our classroom. There was no surprise on my face this time, only dread, for by now I had grown to expect the sort of magnetic aura I possessed that attracted these foul creatures. Though they proved time and time again the irrelevance of humanity, how inferior we were to them on a scale we couldn't comprehend, I could no longer feel shocked at whatever cause I bore that attracted the things to me. Could it be in my blood, as I had witnessed my mother interacting with these things with no apprehension? Could it be something in my position being of interest to them, whether they knew it or not? I couldn't know the answer to this question, but long had reactions such as shock or anger given way to the maddening voices, the discomforting dreams, and to sounds that I knew were not that constantly threatened my sanity. It was shortly after that day that the boy joined our class that I found myself in another dangerous predicament. My mother had received a number of passes to a local resort, a facility that boasted a luxurious hot spring in close proximity to a number of beaches. The deities that invaded my household jumped at the opportunity to attend such a place, and despite my claim of how tired I was due to the events at Rillier, I was dragged off, arm in arm by two alien beings, to join them on their excursion. With little say in the matter, we were soon at the resort, though I knew no comfort or relaxation would find me on this trip. It is of note that we brought along two companions from our class, one a friend to the visitors, an aforementioned girl with a knack for journalism, and another a longtime friend of mine, who of late was increasingly concerned with my constant drained state during classes. I do not think it occurred to them what the three things that constantly clamored for attention around me were, as by this point they had become adept at blending in with society, or rather, society had become adept at completely ignoring whatever unnatural behavior the things exhibited. They would whisper to me later how awkward things seemed to be here and there, such as their perception of the gravity of creatures and the increase in weight they had when gathered around me, or offhanded questions as to what that great winged creature was that accompanied us, but never would their minds make the connection between these odd events and the true otherworldliness of the visitors. Whether that was by their skill of adaptation, or perhaps some sort of effect they had that quieted the curiosity my classmates had, I still cannot say. It was that night that I believe I broke down in full for the first time throughout this whole ordeal. As I have written before, I would never grow accustomed to these things, for I knew what they truly were, understood the madness that followed them, and realized that their true capabilities were far beyond my comprehension. These creatures, however, would leave me no choice in the matter. That night, as I took to my room and made an attempt to enjoy sleeping in what would normally be such a relaxing atmosphere, I awoke with an intruder in the room. on top of me, with a loosened robe and an intoxicating voice, was the first one I encountered, the one with aspirations of mating, Nyala Thurdup. No one would interfere, it said. We were truly alone. It pounced on top of me. That body. Was it a body? Or was it a writhing mass of tentacles? Pushing me down. Its sweet voice. Was it a voice? Or was it a mad choir of piping instruments, beckoning me to join together with it? Or was it the black man demanding my signature in blood? Or was it the pharaoh convincing me and legions of others to join it? I do not know. How could I understand? You must understand my warning. Please understand. Please. Magnum Major. Thy ad acade as at Aden. Agus bastanacort. Donas estolas or Agus leet saw. End of chapter.